The trip was fun, from what we could remember at least. Olivia and I had made the weekend trip down to St. Augustine, Florida, with her younger brother John. The 4-hour drive from Albany, Georgia, to one of America's oldest cities, was long and boring. The 4-lane highways, barren and isolated, far from anything except miles of impenetrable forest and the occasional shithole rest stop. But the journey was well worth it. The 3 of us partied all weekend. St. Augustine's famous St. George Street, a haven for stylish food, amazing alcohol, and a lively atmosphere, all amidst an environment encapsulated by charming bars and a historical 19th century aesthetic. The aura of a small town felt of a fascinating history, and one with a constant stream of perfect 70-degree weather. Now here we were, riding back home on a Sunday morning, all 3 of us hungover. The Airbnb had forced us out at an unforgiving 10 a.m. Olivia was too sick to drive, so that left me in control of her Corolla. Me and my own miserable migraine. John stayed slouched in the back, his own slow mannerisms and groggy mood affected by 48 hours of constant booze. Like robbers recovering from a wild shootout and police chase, we stayed silent in the struggle, silent in the cold. Somehow, the temperature had plummeted down to the low 50s the second we left St. Augustine. I was the oldest of the group at 27, a struggling poet turned professional college student. The teacher certificate I'd been putting off now pulled me back to Georgia Southwestern State University. With green eyes and long black hair, I could be attractive. Just maybe not now with the stubble and unwashed hair. Sitting beside me, Olivia wasn't feeling too well. Still pretty with her tall, athletic frame, her big eyes stood out on the dark brown skin. Olivia's fashion at an all-time low right now, with her wrinkled hoodie and black leggings. But understandably so. Sprawled out in the back, John was barely awake, barely conscious. A half-empty water bottle rested in his hand, his curly black hair aloof, his angular face unable to crack a smile or any other expression. At 19, John was already a veteran of the downside of alcohol. Such was a testament to our wild weekend. Olivia turned up the heat. "Peter, it's cold." Her fiery voice groaned. "I know, babe," I replied. I stole a look at my phone's GPS, still 3 hours and 10 minutes away. Leaning back, Olivia closed her eyes in a weak attempt to soften the hangover. Under the cloudy sky, we continued driving. I passed a green Toyota driven by an old man, a silver SUV full of 3 kids and a tormented mom, a lumbering, rusty pickup and its even more decrepit farmer. But aside from them and a few billboards, the 3 of us were alone in this green inferno. The backwoods highway. I mean, there wasn't a house or business in sight. No tourist traps, no gas stations. Still battling the headache, I checked the gas meter. Then unease set in. We only had a quarter tank left. Olivia had told me to fill up in St. Augustine, but surely there had to be a place to fill up out here in the middle of nowhere. I checked my phone. 40 miles from I-75. 40 miles from any sign of life. In silence, I turned my attention back to the road. There was nothing on the horizon. Nothing but trees and a few Jesus billboards, a few anti-abortion ads, and billboards for businesses that seemed lost in a bygone era of folksy enterprises. Shops dedicated to cowboy hats. Sex shops like the Lion's Den. Even Wakula Springs, a family-friendly alligator preserve in Tallahassee, Florida. kept scanning the highway. There weren't even side roads out here, no paths through the woods, no human touch, just deep ditches and even deeper forests. Trembling from the cold and anxiety, I turned on the radio. The shrill static gave us all a rude awakening. Both Olivia and John groaned. "My bad," I said. I journeyed station to station. In between the white noise, there was music, just nothing I'd ever heard before. No classic rock playlists alternating between the same 10 staples. No hit radio. No popular hip-hop stations. Here we were, out on a lonesome highway, and there wasn't even a channel playing the latest country chart toppers. Instead, all I got was odd obscurity amongst the scrambled static and classical music. There was weird indie pop, homemade rap, overproduced Christian rock, and country music transmitted from the Great Depression. I wasn't an expert, but my ears were well versed in different eras and genres, and I still had no clue what this shit was. As if our radio had picked up a lost signal from the depths of rejected demos from decades past. Her eyes closed, Olivia grimaced. "Just turn it off." Obeying her command, I turned down the radio. John leaned towards us. "Olivia, come on," he said in his deep voice. "That folk music wasn't that bad." Olivia waved us off. "Nah, I got a headache." My eyes strayed back to the 4-lane road. The unease returned. There were still no cars anywhere, not a soul in sight. How could a Sunday be this dead? Especially this close to the tourist traps, and this close to the holidays. I hadn't seen a car since the hideous pickup crawling along in the cold. Even our surroundings still looked the same, unchanged for the last few miles. Nothing but wildlife. The forest a Florida maze. "You always say that," John teased Olivia. "No, I'm serious," Olivia said, rubbing her temple. She faced us. "I can't believe I drank that much last night." John smirked. "Neither can I." Displaying her trademark temper, Olivia glared at him. John instantly lost his smile. "Fuck, I'm hungover too," I said, breathing out cold air. I looked back at the GPS. Now my anxiety graduated to horror. We were far from any road, far from the interstate, the gas station, and most of all, far from home. 3 hours and 10 minutes away, the GPS read. 40 miles from I-75. This entire time, we hadn't gotten any closer. Not a single mile. "I need more Powerade," I heard Olivia say. Frantic, I checked the gas meter. Only 1 gallon left. The race for civilization was on. The race for help. "Fuck," I muttered, unable to control the panic. I felt my foot mash the pedal. Desperation was taking hold. Olivia leaned over. "Peter, slow down!" She yelled. Time to face the music. I looked over at her. "We're low on gas." "What?" Olivia shouted, her anger overtaking that hangover. "I didn't know the road was this long." Olivia punched my shoulder. "God damn it, Peter! I told you to fill up in St. Augustine." Trying to intervene, John reached towards her. "Whoa, Olivia." She pushed him back. "Nah, fuck that. I told y'all this goddamn road takes forever." "Look, we'll make it," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "We've still got a gallon." Olivia's irate eyes latched onto me. The hangover only intensified her pissed-off fury. "A gallon?" she yelled. Olivia leaned in toward my phone. How far away are we? Avoiding her glare, I stared at the highway. I still saw no other roads or driveways, no houses, no break from this rural madness. I don't know, babe. John kept his distance in the back, a few nervous gulps of water, all he had to say. It said 40 miles last time I checked, I told Olivia. Alarmed, she faced me. What the fuck? It still says 40 miles. Whoa, that's weird, John said. Full of dread, I checked the GPS. Olivia was right. We still hadn't gotten any closer. That can't be right, I said. It can't. Olivia placed her hand against her forehead, at war with terror and a killer migraine. It still says it, Peter. Well, it's gotta be fucked up then, or a fucked up signal. Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere, John said. I grabbed Olivia's shoulder, trying to reassure her. Hey babe, we can't be too far. Olivia looked at me. But what if we don't make it? What are we gonna do? It's fucking freezing. My head hurts. Supportive, I squeezed her shoulder. Hey, we'll call somebody, alright? We'll call 911. Olivia's eyes stayed on me. She was an emotional drunk, even hungover. But if we get to a gas station, I'll fill it up, I told her. Okay, Olivia said. I forced a smile. Fuck it, I'll pay for it. Olivia gave me a weak grin. Okay. Thanks, man, John deadpanned. The three of us cracked up. Our strong bond warmed us from the winter, and our ever-increasing desolation. But hey, babe, I'm sorry I didn't fill up, I said as I caressed Olivia's leg. That's my fault, alright, I'm sorry. With a smooth touch, Olivia grabbed my wrist. It's okay, I didn't mean to get mad, it's just the hangover. I know, you've taken care of me before. Olivia chuckled. I know the pain, I reassured her. Crashing our conversation, John pointed towards the radio. Hey, let's get some tunes going. Alright, Olivia said. Let's get our mind off this shit, John added. As Olivia got ready to turn up the volume, I looked towards the highway, toward the parade of pavement. There was no end in sight. The surrounding trees, mocking audience to our paranoia. Then, the garage rock came on, the vocals guttural, the guitars raw. The song grainy with no chance for the charts, or the radio for that matter. Their profane lyrics and obnoxious synthesizers were too modern to be from the 60s, but the sound quality was somehow even worse. At least Olivia kept these rock and roll rejects at a merciful low. John cracked up. What the fuck? Another swig finished off his water bottle. I smiled at Olivia. Is this all we got? Playful, Olivia leaned back. Just leave it here. What is this anyway? I said. Why do all the stations sound like stock footage or something? I faced the road. Vague excitement crept in once I saw a handful of cars up ahead. A sign of life. John rolled down the window. It's probably cheaper, he quipped. The joke died before it hit its uproarious peak. Those cars before us looked so familiar. The green Toyota, the mom's silver SUV, Farmer Joe's hideous pickup. The trio taunted me. A déjà vu from hell. I just passed all 3 of them moments ago. But here they were, in the exact same order, the exact same spots. "Yo, watch out," I heard John say. "John!" Olivia yelled. Glancing back, I saw John leaning out the window, ready to toss the bottle. A smile on his face. "Olivia, chill," John said. "That's polluting." She yelled back. Indifferent, John threw the bottle out. A ferocious bang erupted over the radio. Each of us jumped. John fell back in his seat. Together, the 3 of us looked out the back window, stunned. The highway behind us was wobbly, distorted. The sky was shifting back and forth, the trees shaking as if they were stumbling in a daze. "Holy shit," I muttered. A cheap bottle of water was the butterfly effect. The scenery behind us, nothing more than an illusion. A rear projection, and one that had been behind us this entire trip. "Yo, what the fuck was that?" John cried out. Olivia stayed in a haunted silence, her unease obvious. The shitty garage rock a funeral hymn for our fear. Shivering, I confronted the gas meter. That 1 gallon was shriveling up quick. "God damn it!" I yelled. In a tight grip, Olivia grabbed my arm. "Just keep driving, babe." "I am!" John looked at us. "What the fuck is going on? I don't understand." We passed the same cars from earlier. Olivia and I stared at them, our horror only increasing as we passed each one. The green Toyota was driven by a muscular male, his clothes stuffed with padding, his old man mask straight out of an uncanny valley store, the mask pure nightmare fuel. In the SUV, our family of 4 was actually a family of 1. Only the female driver was human, her clothes covered by protective gear, an obvious blonde wig on her head. Every one of the kids was nothing more than a soulless dummy, mannequins, too lifelike to notice from afar. "They're not real!" Olivia cried in terror. I turned my attention to the ugly pickup. Sure enough, the farmer was in similar good shape. Upon closer inspection, he too wore padding, his face younger than the costume let on. "Why the hell are they wearing that?" John said. Feeling a noose of nerves wrapping around my neck, I looked out for a gas station, a rest stop, a side road, anything. But instead of comfort, all I found were more warning signs. Those same billboards lined up one after another. The Lion's Den, Wakula Springs, the fucking cowboy hat store. All of them stood at the same stations. All of them much scarier the second time around. Helpless horror paralyzed me. The radio's clanging guitars and screaming no longer fazed me, and neither did the cold. We were trapped. Olivia's fingers stuck deeper into my flesh. "Peter, keep going. Go!" Then I saw it, a mirage on the painted stage. There was a gas station on the right. Moore's, just 2 pumps and an ugly shack. The station's smiling sun sign so glorious in its technicolor nightmare. "Pull over!" Olivia shouted with excitement. I hit the brake and swerved right in there. In the back seat, John flew to the side. "Shit, man!" he cried. Olivia continued clinging to my shoulder for dear life. "God damn it, Peter, don't wreck my car!" "I'm not!" I yelled back. With a theatrical flourish, I stopped by the first gas pump. Kill the ignition. I flashed a smile at Olivia. Fuck, we made it. She stared at the store, neither of us encouraged by its antique Coca-Cola signs, torn screen door, and countless cobwebs. I looked all around us. The parking lot was empty. The cavernous woods, Moore's only neighbors. Without the heater on, cold air made its glorious return, as did our unease. John leaned in behind us. Are they even open? And Moore's screen door slammed open. Out that tiny store stormed many people, all of them well-dressed, some holding cameras and boom mics. Their spotlight of hungry eyes focusing on us. Screeching tires cut through the stock music. We turned to see the SUV and other cars had pulled in behind us, the 3 vehicles forming a barricade. We panicked, frozen in fear, trapped on this backwoods soundstage. What the hell is going on? Olivia shouted. All the stunt drivers hopped out. An army of actors and crew now poured out of the woods. Bloodstains covered their skin and clothes. One fat man in particular wore a decomposing Santa mask, a long knife rather than a bag of toys in his hand. Beaming lights blinded the 3 of us. Both Olivia's hands now gripped my arm, 10 sharp fingernails sinking straight into my skin. We strained to see through the blinding light, through the village of light stands placed all around Olivia's car. The crew camped right outside us. A wild excitement spread among them. Their many cameras formed the unflinching eyes of the filmmaking monster. Through the terror, I just prayed to God they weren't shooting a horror movie. But deep down, I knew we were in one of the genre's most ideal locations, and this looked to be an indie shoot. Olivia and I exchanged worried looks, the 2 of us holding on to each other for as long as the script would allow. Panicking, John looked back and forth between the crew and incoming actors, not ready for his close-up. What the fuck? He said in a trembling voice. The radio turned down on its own, garage rock now a whimper. Action! A bellowing voice roared through the speakers. It all started with the first snow. It's strange how you don't notice important things until they've already passed. So when I saw a set of footprints leading halfway into my yard, and none going out, I ignored it. Sure, it was weird, but what did it matter? Some random guy might have been interested in my paint or something. To me, it was a passing thing, literally. Nothing happened for a while. The snow began to melt, and soon there wasn't any sign of the prints, just the bitter cold. But sometimes I would feel like I was being watched. Occasionally, I would misplace something, unable to find it. This was logical, however. I lived alone. Getting the heebie-jeebies happened, and I was something of a ditz. Losing stuff was nothing out of the normal for me. 2 weeks ago, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked at it and didn't see it anymore. I felt scared, and I picked up a bat near my couch. I turned on my lights and looked around. Nothing there. And I went down the hall and checked my room and my office. Nothing. I sighed in relief and let my bat fall. I walked back out to my living room and set the bat down. I sat on my couch and relaxed. As much as I could, at least. I still felt deeply unnerved. The day after that, there was a string of burglaries in my neighborhood. Like a raging fire, 20 separate people were robbed. 10 more were left dead. Have you ever felt so completely terrified you couldn't talk? I was after that. not just because 10 people nearby me were killed, but when one of the robbers was caught, he was asked why certain houses weren't selected. No families were robbed. I was spared because the gang had seen a figure, an 8-foot-tall figure with an unnatural smile in my window. I bought multiple guns that day, one for each room, and a rifle and a shotgun. I went through the entirety of my house with that shotgun. Nothing there. I checked the crawl space in the attic. Nothing there. 1 week later, I came home from work to find my front door open. I grabbed the gun I hid by my door and made sure it was loaded. I heard something in the kitchen and ran into the room. I nearly shot the gun when I rounded the corner, but nothing was there. I left the house with my gun in hand and called the police. Every door was open, and every cabinet was open. Every window was open. There was a single plate broken in the kitchen. There were no signs of breaking and entering. The police officer that was sent out there said, "Looks more like something was trying to break out." He also said off the record that a similar incident had happened to a friend, and that it had ended when he had a pastor come out and bless the house. I took the officer's advice with a grain of salt. It couldn't be something religious, right? If I was so paranoid as to proclaim it the work of a boogeyman in the sky, I just needed some air, or maybe some meds. I booked a hotel room, brought my Xbox, and called a pastor to bless my house. So what if I had a guy go into my house to fix what could have been my own mind's fallacies? It could bring peace to my stressful state. I had a good night. No strange things. A hotel hot tub and an unhealthy amount of gaming. So when checkout time came, I merrily walked out and tried to call the pastor. He didn't respond. I ignored it. He was probably tired or doing stuff that pastors do. Dread is something that starts small, oh so tiny that kernel is, and you ignore it. But when you ignore it, dread will grow. So it grows and suffocates all of your other thoughts, one by one. I walked into my home to find nothing different than when I left. I tried the pastor again, and again there was no reply. With all of a Saturday ahead of me, I decided to hit town with some friends. I had a great time, but it was there in the back of my mind. Dread. I ignored it though, pretending that nothing was there at all. At 11 p.m., when I came home, nothing was there. I tried the pastor several times throughout the day, but he hadn't ever returned my calls. I lay down and began to drift off to sleep when I smelled a smoky, earthy aroma. Burning sage. I sat up and rubbed the sleep out of my eyes. I heard humming. I grabbed the shotgun, but before I could even get out of bed, there was a thump. I turned every light on. Nothing was there. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to a waking dream. I woke up the next morning to a weight in my bed, like someone was beside me. I nearly shat myself then, but fortunately, my hand was close to the knife I left under my pillow. Screaming, I grabbed it and stabbed the bed next to me. But nothing was there. Just me, sweating, and a knife sticking out of my bed. I felt like I was going insane, but I figured it had to be another waking dream. Nothing happened the next day, at least in my home. The pastor I had called was found 20 miles away, mangled and murdered. He must have never reached my house. I still felt guilty, though. The police came by the next day. I was one of the last people he had talked to, so it made sense. I was spared explaining my guns left out by my location, thankfully. The police and the people here were still very wary after the robberies. The next 3 days were calm. I was still a nervous wreck in my own home, but nothing out of the ordinary occurred. Until tonight, I woke up half-dazed and hearing voices. It took a moment to register, but it was the same conversation I had with the two detectives. I wondered what they were doing in my house until I heard my own voice. I've had enough. I picked up my shotgun, checked it was chambered, and decided not to alert anyone by turning on the light. I crept to my living room and saw a figure. I shot it in the back from 5 feet away with a buck slug. An unearthly screech came from it and had disappeared. "There's nothing there," I muttered in disbelief as I turned on the light. There was no bullet hole in my wall either, so I knew I wasn't crazy. Hoped would be a better word for it, but nevertheless, I called the police and explained the situation. It was a carbon copy of the last time I called the police. The same cop came out, and another plate was found broken in my kitchen. I'm at a hotel now. I packed a bag for about a week, brought a gun and my Xbox. I was playing Rainbow Six Siege when the power cut out. Only in my building. It was probably just some faulty wiring. Not like I could leave anyway. The lock on my door was entirely electric. What has inspired me to write this detail, however, is that for the last 5 minutes, there's been something walking up and down my hallway. With every round it takes down the hall, one of my neighbors lets out a blood-curdling scream. I think they're dead. The only thing that makes it worse is that in a perfect imitation of me, I can hear it saying, "There's nothing there." I come from the outskirts of a small town in the south of England. It's a quaint town, if I'm honest. That doesn't really have much to put it on the map. Our history has mostly been silenced and mundane. Farms surround us. A coal mine was our major source of trade until that was exhausted in the early 20s. And other than routine, there's really not much else going for us. However, I'm wanting to tell you about the one thing that really caused a stir in the town a few decades ago, the ripple of which is still felt today. It's hardly going to be a tourist trap, quite the opposite if anything, but it's infinitely more interesting than farms and coal mines, even if for the wrong reasons. This is, as the title suggests, The Burnt Man. There have been so many tales about him that had changed, evolved, and morphed over the years, fitting as such in the nature of flames, that it seemed as if people had outright forgotten whether it was factual or folklore. He somehow stemmed from individual strange occurrences and bloomed into our homegrown boogeyman. From what I've overheard, read, gathered, and remember, the birth of the Burnt Man legend was down to a report from a woman who had been followed one night. This must have been late 80s, early 90s. Apparently the report was shrugged off because the woman was known for enhancing the truth, especially if she'd been out the one pub in town. Awful, I know, but it was a different time. But not long after, more reports started flooding in. So many, so that there had to be some iota of truth to it. Not only were more reputable women claiming they'd been followed, but the stories all had similar qualities. And this was before the Burning Man was public knowledge. All at night, all walking alone, all said their stalker kept a safe distance, would just stop walking if they turned around, but maintained it until they turned a corner and fled. Everyone in the town knew each other, if not directly, at least via a friend or family member, so the fact that no one could quite put a finger on who the mysterious could be, it caused quite a stir. The embers of the story were fanned when, after a month or two of reports and no successful action, some of the women had managed to catch a glimpse of him. or so they claimed. From what I can recall, there was an anxious excitement that blazed from mind to mind, and everywhere from the post office to the school, to the pub, to the doctor's office, there was some version of the burnt man being told. The descriptions have been so varied over the years that it's difficult to discern whether the mundane or fantastical reports came first. They seem to have been bandied about with such fervor that it became a form of entertainment, moreover warning. Some of what stuck with me are most of the face burnt so that only tough scar tissue and pink, sundered flesh could be seen, which was quickly contradicted with wears a mask and hat to cover his disfigurement. No eyebrows or eyelashes, no facial hair, completely bald. Though who would get so close to see? Others claimed. Scalp scorched so severely that only tufts and clumps sprouted out sporadically and wildly, and even they were tinder dry and wisps at most. Some people said he was burnt so bad that his flesh still glowed with the embers. Others said that in his eyes you could see the flames of hell flickering. Soon after, there came the idea that certain telltale signs could be spotted that let you know he was around, even if you couldn't see him. If there was an inexplicable smell of sulfur, then he was lurking nearby. Your only cause of action would be to flee the scene and find someone to help. If you were walking and happened upon a pile of ash, it meant he'd been there not long ago. This one apparently had most evidence, but then was later debunked when a group of teens were cautioned by the police after they were caught leaving trails and mounds of ash outside the houses of widowed women. If you heard high-pitched laughter or squeaky voices conversing in a different language, they were his minions that scouted prime victims. My favorite was, apparently, so long as you had a keen eye, you could work out his location in advance if you looked above the houses and spotted a thin trail of smoke. I used to be obsessed with the idea that no matter what I was doing, no matter where I was, there could be a scream or a cry for help at any moment. Whether from a prank or an imagined sighting, I didn't care. It simply fascinated me. Maybe because the town was so boring, and this element of danger offered a remedy to the mundanity, but still. Though after a while, the reports grew more worrying and took a sinister turn. People were no longer being followed, but attacked, and more. This substantiated a lot of the fear that people were feeling, and I suppose it took the excitement away and replaced it with genuine danger, at least for a while. Though it transpired that these reports always claimed the man was wearing a mask and a hat, they flooded in so fast and so widespread for the size of the town that it caused further panic, and theories began to increase the velocity of the rumor mill. People began to wonder whether some of these attacks were from opportunists taking advantage of this feared assailant and dressing themselves to fit the fabled aesthetic, going out and paying heed to their urges of malcontent, whilst having a ready-cooked scapegoat to take the blame. Some believed there was an organized group, whether local or from afar. It was never made clear. Whisperings of a cult were entertained with this theory. Some outright went and decided that, with such volume, the burnt man was in sooth a supernatural being, and he was employing some diabolical power to increase his activity. Soon after the attacks, the whole burnt man phenomena began edging towards its climax, and people began disappearing without a trace. And finally, when 4 bodies were found, bound and burnt, in one of the stables about a mile out of town, a strict curfew was enforced for both men and women. Of course, the initial response to this was that the farmer was the burnt man all along. But that was quickly disproven when his own body was found, also burnt and bound. The town had been more tense than it ever had been, and the vigil held for the deceased was heartbreakingly sparse, seeing as most people didn't want to be caught outside if they didn't have to be. Effectively, the curfew reduced the reports, the attacks, and the fear, though there were still a few here and there, perhaps from desperate nobodies wanting to claim a semblance of relevance. I'm unsure. Even to this day, when people go missing, usually younger people or those who had been the subject of some trivial scandal or another, would still have the odd person believe it was the burnt man, rather than them escaping into anonymity or relocating to a bigger city where opportunity was rife. When it all died down, that's when the aforementioned tales took full force. It was as if, in the absence of imminent danger, people actually missed it. The stories either intended to keep people vigilant, or they had a sick intrigue, like me, into what awakened a sleeping town. It was the farmer's illegitimate son, was a strong claim. The man tried to burn him alive as a lad, so he ran away, grew up, and got revenge. A demon! Another story that had more spiritual and God-fearing championed. Born from the flames and cast out of hell because he was too evil, even by their standards. A psychopath from the asylum in the town over. This I found most chilling in its plausibility. That asylum was renowned and had a horrid history. An arsonist who burned his family in a fit of madness, and his only way to sate the agony was subjecting others to the same fate. Over the years, the burnt man has found himself joining the Halloween roster. I've seen kids knock at doors in their little groups, some as witches, vampires, werewolves, and Frankensteins. And then one, wearing a top hat with orange ribbons dangling down, and a thin mask covered most of the face. Any flesh left visible, painted pink and raw. It's also become a tradition in the town that on the day the bodies were found, people will take old clothes, fill them with hay, much like the Guy Fawkes tradition on bonfire night, and burn them, an offering to keep the demon bastard psycho at bay. It's actually surprisingly festive, and even the adults will join, dress up, share drinks. They love to watch the kids scream with feigned terror, watch the blooming fireworks color the night sky, and trade their favorite burnt man tale to friends who have heard them 1,000,000 times already. Or listen to their older generation who saw him once heading toward the forest, or introducing children to the terror of their own town. It's odd to feel proud of something so grim, isn't it? But if all you had for an attraction was an oddly shaped boulder excavated from the local coal mine, perhaps you too would take pride in the insidious. I found the effect of the burnt man has infected people in different ways, especially when it comes to the annual burning. It's as if the horror himself is famous, equally treasured, revered, and feared. The amount of women I've seen chatting to the men, wearing more impressive costumes, and giggling, chatting, even screaming with laughter, as the man would grab them around the waist and pretend their intentions is to throw them on the pyre. I guess we all like that danger, because it reminds us that we're lucky to be alive. I must admit, too, I've taken advantage of dressing up, sharing drinks, and using the fable to win some attention from others. Most even love when I commit myself to the character completely, a role play of sorts. Though I must say, my favorite thing about the tales, the legends, the horror, and sick excitement is when I take off my mask. They all make the sheer look of terror on my next victim's face all the more potent. Hello, My name is... well, that doesn't matter now. I'm in some deep shit right now, and I need some serious help. I was an employee at a local chemical manufacturer called Prochem. I worked as a chemical engineer in Unit 16, which was a division of the plant which manufactured components of gasoline. Unit 17 was different, however. Each unit of the complex manufactured different chemicals, and Unit 17 happened to make the components of fertilizer. This will be important in a bit. My day had started perfectly normal with me getting my equipment from my locker, monitoring the standard gauges on Unit 16's equipment, and occasionally turning a valve to redirect flow of chemical reactants. Finally, my lunch break came and I sat down with my 3 coworkers, Hank, Mark, and Evan. Hank and Evan worked with me on the floor in Unit 16, while Mark worked in Unit 16's control room, where he would monitor key systems, control reactions, or tell us what needed to be done. After lunch, I heard a single, loud bang, followed by a hissing noise coming from Unit 17. Hank told us that he would check out what happened next door, and he dashed off down Unit 17's corridor. Silence followed for minutes. Then a white-green fog slowly rolled out of the hallway, followed by Hank. Hank stepped out of the hallway, coughing up blood and wheezing. Seconds later, he fell to his knees and dropped dead in front of us. Completely horrified, the remaining 3 of us put on our respirators and we ran for the exit, only to find the building's security system was in lockdown mode. It turns out that after the incident, the doors went into auto-lock to contain the disaster, which ended up failing anyway. The receptionist had tried everything she could to get the door open, even trying to smash the metal door with the emergency fire axe. Knowing that we couldn't get out this way, we went upstairs to the office level. The offices were torn up in a mass panic, and every office near Unit 17 was already flooded with a cloudy green fog. When we got to the roof of the building, we heard utter silence. All around the building was the same green fog. By now, the fog was up the building's 3rd story, and much of the city around us was still visible, yet silence. Cars were crashed, roads were empty, and most horrifyingly, people lay dead on the sidewalks. In the distance, I could see the city's high school, which was only just becoming surrounded with the chemical smog. I decided we should head back in case the fog covered up the roof. The others agreed, and we went back to the lobby. By now, the receptionist had accepted her fate and merely sat at her desk waiting for what's to come. What caught our attention next was our lack of phone signal. The only working phone was the landline at the receptionist's desk. Angela tried using said landline to call 911, but they flat out told us they weren't sending help until the fog had cleared. Evan chimed in and suggested that we find useful materials. After careful thinking, we decided to check the 2nd floor supply closet. When we got there, we found more respirators, a fire extinguisher, a flashlight, disinfectant, and a variety of industrial chemicals. We grabbed 1 extra respirator, the flashlight, and disinfectant and started back towards the lobby. Halfway back, we were quickly halted by 3rd floor office employees running down the stairs while screaming in immense pain. His body was completely covered in chemical burns, and he died before we could even try to disinfect his burns. When we got back to the lobby, we saw 2 familiar faces, the custodian Mitch and Diane from the financial offices. They managed to make their way to relative safety while we hunted for supplies. I hadn't even managed to get a word in before the lights flickered and went out entirely. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I think the chemicals leaking from Unit 17 choked out the backup generator. I flipped on my flashlight soon after the lights went out and tried to think of what we should do next. After thinking for a bit, I realized we would need to find food. I immediately got to work and looted a vending machine in the lobby. I distributed food to everyone in the room, and we hunkered down there for about 10 minutes before shit went south. Way south. A battery-powered alarm went off, signifying contaminants had gotten into the ventilation system. Immediately, the air became stale, and it had a weird smell, and was awful to breathe. We needed to get out, now. I ripped open the basement door and followed a maintenance shaft down along the length of the building. Evan, Mitch, and Mark desperately tried to keep up, despite not even myself knowing where I was headed. And then I reached a dead end between two pieces of process equipment. I looked behind me. The fog had blocked my escape route and was only drifting towards me and my peers. Don't bother trying to help, because I am guaranteed a horrible and painful death. If my family is still alive out there, I love you all. This will be the last you'll hear of me. Please promise me you won't take it too hard, okay? This will be my last message, as I am now a dead man walking.